The following podcast is scheduled for one fall.
It's almost time for a new chapter of GeeK KetchUp to start. But before it does, Chris and I wanted to take a moment to send our love and appreciation out to all of you for choosing to hang out with us. If you enjoy GeeK KetchUp, then make sure to slam that subscribe button and help us level up the show by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform.
You can also find us on social media to get updates on all things GK, interact directly with us, and content from the world of geekery. GeeK KetchUp Podcast on Facebook and YouTube, at GeeK KetchUp Pod on Instagram and Twitter, links to all of which can be found in the show notes below and on our website, geekketchuppodcast.com.
If you'd like to support the shoe, there's even links to our Square shop where you can find official GK merchandise like shirts and stickers. And Patreon if extra content is your thing. Above all, though, the absolute best thing you can do is spread the love for the world of geekery by sharing the GeeK KetchUp podcast with your friends and family.
Now get ready to enjoy today's show, and as always, remember to stay saucy.
If it's nerdy, we're into it. Gaming, movies, television, wrestling, comics, whatever. We are Kyle Eckert and Chris Heck, two lifelong friends with a passion for the world of geekery.
And this is the GeeK KetchUp Podcast.
Welcome back, GeeK KetchUp family. I'm Chris Heck.
And I'm Kyle Eckert.
We're officially in the 2021 holiday season, and 2022 is right around the corner, but for us, we're still going strong with Season 3, and this is Chapter 48. It's been another long year, but one thing that has stayed exciting is the world of professional wrestling, and for today's chapter, Kyle and I want to hone in on all that's been going on so that we can discuss the current state of the pro wrestling landscape. For this, we are going to be focusing in on what we would consider the big four in the North American television market. The big dog on the block, WWE, which is fresh off of its Survivor Series event and an unprecedented number of talent releases. All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, the relatively new but extremely hot promotion that has taken the industry by storm and is owned by its own billionaire family. Then there is the company that had a few different names over the years in Impact Wrestling. They've managed to hang around and have a presence in the landscape for almost 20 years and have even received a shot of adrenaline, if you will, from their crossovers recently with AEW. And then finally, there's Ring of Honor, which also sports a 20-year history and was once considered an emerging major promotion out of Baltimore, Maryland, that has used its international partnerships and a consistent indie-like feel to remain relevant. Unfortunately, however, recent developments have seen the company's future up in question. Now, before we dive into things here, I do want to say that everything Kyle and I discuss is based on public information and our personal opinions as fans with a combined 50 or so years following the sport. We're not insiders or anything like that, but we are two guys who have a lot of love for sports entertainment, and with so much going on, we want to share how we see the state of things today and what things may be like 5 to 10 years down the road. So let's ring the bell and get this match started by reviewing a few key points about each of the companies. Things like announcements, news, signings, releases, etc. And we'll start with the one that everyone is most familiar with, Vince McMahon's WWE. So continuing their 50-plus year history, World Wrestling Entertainment went into 2020 with plenty of criticism from the fans, but relatively still being considered the industry's top destination. Vince McMahon had squashed his biggest competitor back in 2000 and has faced little threat for the last 20 years. But with new competition rising, the WWE's issues became more glaring, and the company has seemingly been undergoing a transformation that has left fans with more questions than answers. So despite weathering the 2020 pandemic lockdowns and striking a $2 billion deal with NBC to move all streaming of new events and the back catalog from the WWE Network to Peacock, the company has been cutting talent left and right.
Indeed, they have. It's been a total shakeup, top to bottom, for WWE recently. I think you nailed it there. For 20 plus years, they haven't had any true competition. Like, yeah, TNA's been around, Impact's been around, Ring of Honor's existed, but no one has really threatened them on the TV market.
Right.
And, they became synonymous with wrestling, like almost Kleenex version.
True.
As I actually recently described to a coworker, where people like wrestling in WWE, like when you're describing it to non-wrestling fans, like the idea that there is a wrestling promotion out there that isn't WWE is so foreign to them because WWE has dominated the market for so long. And it's been really interesting to kind of watch and see that now that they have real competition in AEW and the rise of Impact, and fans are getting wise and finding other ways to reach out to the product, that they're shaken. They don't know what to do, and they're really being put under a microscope for before we had nowhere else to go to get wrestling. And now we have a few places we can go, and they need to figure out how to get back on course because their storylines and everything have not been the best. And now that we have somewhere else to go, you can really see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's really been odd as a fan to watch. And especially as a fan that does like, to take some interest in the business side of things, the backstage side of things, and all of that, especially as we've also gotten so much more view into those aspects of the wrestling business versus 20, 30, 40 years ago, where it was a completely hidden door. There was the ring and everything that happened in it, and then you never really truly understood or knew what was going on unless you were the Dave Meltzers of the world back in the day, whatever, like those real insiders that were chasing it down. So they managed to come through those 20 years without a whole lot of issues. I mean, there's been ups and downs. There's been good talent and bad talent on the roster, but relatively maintained a decent product and really strong at times. And we've seen it since we came back around to really following it since 2013, where we've had a number of moments where we've questioned what was going on, and this was pre-AEW popping onto the scene and really giving them competition. And we always kind of wrote it off to like, oh, well, yeah, it's because they don't have competition.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want and only give so many fucks about what the fans feel like because they know that people are still going to come to get wrestling.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure that, when we saw AEW come onto the rise and really hit it hard, I thought for sure that was going to make WWE better. They shined when they fought WCW, in the late 90s. They won that war, and it arguably was the greatest they've ever been as far as the television they were producing. And we saw that not quite shake out. It's almost even gotten shakier.
Yeah.
And despite some of the deals and things like that, we've still seen even more turmoil come from the last couple of months.
For sure. I think of a tweet by Eric Bischoff, with like Vince McMahon's biggest rival in that Attitude Era, where he was like, don't count out Vince McMahon backed into a corner. Like, that's when he does his best work. And so you thought, yeah, this rise of AEW was going to cause him to really reevaluate what he has and how he needs to move forward. He just hasn't. Like, it seems strange. And we're going to pin a lot of this on Vince McMahon specifically, but it's also the people that he's put around them.
Yeah.
It's the John Laurinaitis, the Bruce Pritchards of the world, like his yes men that he has surrounded himself with. They haven't reevaluated the product that they are putting out. And I don't know if it's because they've gone public, and so the revenue streams are a little different, or TV contracts, pay-per-view contracts, network design. There's a lot of factors here into why WWE can just keep the status quo, even when, as a fan, we think that status quo is garbage.
Right.
I'm hoping that something switches soon, because you got to think that if it doesn't switch soon, they could be in real trouble as far as wrestling fans. I don't, they're not going to go out of business, but being the top name in wrestling, I don't know.
And when there's more competition now, I think that it does force them to up their game. I mean, they're competing for my eyeballs, they're competing for your eyeballs, everybody's attention and time.
Yeah.
And when you're not doing it, and it was already a little bit on shaky ground, it just makes it tough. And what has summed it all up is the fact that in the last 2 years, there's been 125 wrestlers that have been released from the WWE rosters, 79 coming this year alone. And many of those names really shocked fans. I mean, you had big name superstars like Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Andrade, Nia Jax, and go on and on. Then there were the ones that they lost because they couldn't get contracts signed with Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. I mean, guys that you almost never thought would have gone anywhere else than WWE. And it just really baffled everybody. Looking at the $2 billion deal, looking at all the money they made through the pandemic, surviving the pandemic with this roster, and then now just almost burning it all to the ground, in the words of Seth Rollins. And between that, the fan frustration with bad creative, they buried the NXT stars over and over again as they would, gain these huge popularities down in what you would consider like the developmental brand.
Yeah.
They'd pop them up to Raw and SmackDown and just destroy them and like pretty much ruin them. And ultimately now we've even seen them ruin the NXT brand entirely with this 2.0, taking it back. I said to you the other day, it looks like they're trying to go back to 1990s character wrestling with some of these people. And, arguably the NXT brand was the hottest part of WWE for the last few years and probably the one that could have really beefed up a war with AEW, and they've just squashed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just so hard to really understand what is going on here with this company right now.
And you don't want to say it, but like, are they prepping for something bigger? I don't know, but to the NXT point, they've completely rebranded NXT because NXT got so big, it was damn near on the level of Raw and SmackDown. Like it was
Easily
almost I shouldn't even say that it was almost. It was on network television. It had its own USA show. Yeah, it was only an hour compared to the 3-hour Raw and the 2-hour SmackDown. But it was no longer a developmental product, and now they've downshifted and turned it back into a developmental product, and it just feels weird because you had this like raw, gritty, you were giving the fan base something that they wanted, and now you've completely done an about face, and I think they've shot themselves in the foot by doing this whole top to bottom rework of NXT because they took something. Like, wrestling is a variety show.
Right. It's a circus.
It's a circus. And so you need all sorts of types of entertainment. You need your main eventers. You need your big guys. You need your little guys. You need your female wrestlers. You need your comedy acts. You need a romance angle.
Yeah.
There's almost always at least one romance angle in a wrestling show. And so why wouldn't you take that same approach to your entire company?
Right.
And have, like, a Raw be one type of thing, SmackDown be another type of thing, and then NXT be unique in its own right. And they were headed down that pathway of like giving those indie loving fans something to grasp onto with NXT. And now right when you needed it the most, arguably, because of the rise of AEW, you're like, no, can it? We're going to go back to just a straight developmental product. And I'm thinking maybe Vince McMahon is doing what he did in the 90s, because you see all those interviews of Vince McMahon in the 90s talking about staying the course. When WCW showed up, he stayed the course, he developed young talent and turned them into future stars. Is he trying to do that again?
He might be. That's a good thought.
But it's a different landscape. It's not the 90s. It's not the 80s.
Right.
The wrestling, the social media era of wrestling has taken over. Things are much more obtainable. Indie wrestling is much more obtainable to fans. So you have to meet them somewhere. You can't just repeat. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I would totally agree there. And I do think that some of the rumors or the speculation that Vince was jealous of NXT or whatever it may be, I think that there's some truth to that at minimum, personally.
Oh, yeah.
Just watching what he's done to the talent, with the exception of just a few people like a Kevin Owens or Finn Balor. I mean, there is only like a handful of people that started out in NXT for them and then came to the main roster and like maintained their momentum and their fandom and all of that. But the rest of them, you know, no matter how good they looked in NXT, were just completely destroyed once they came to Raw.
Oh, yeah.
Now seeing how he did that to the NXT brand, like, I just don't see how it's not him feeling threatened by that brand or thinking that Raw and SmackDown are threatened by the NXT show, because he had a winner. The hardcore fans loved it. You know, you had a lot more younger fans that were following it. And really the main point I want to make is that you know that it grew to something special when people like Finn Balor were trying to go back to it and leave the main roster. And arguably you can even say that at that time, like, NXT didn't need Finn Balor when he went back to the NXT brand, but Finn Balor needed NXT.
Yeah.
And that to me says a lot as far as how legitimate it had become and how good the product was. And of course he had some injury issues and had been off. I think that was why he kind of needed that refresh. But still, like, you had this product that could have been, you know, just soaring, and you've turned it into a joke. I kind of liken the design of it to just like Doink the TV show, because it's like all the rainbow colors and, you know, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. For the first time since maybe 2013 when we came back to it, I will say this, that I'm struggling to bring myself to watch their product. After the SummerSlam was so bad, I did not watch a single of the in-between pay-per-views.
Yeah.
I didn't watch Survivor Series live. I caught it on the replay because they are just doing nothing to demand my attention and dropping all these stars, many of which I was really into, that I thought could be that next wave. It cut the interest even more.
Well, WWE doesn't reward you for watching.
True.
Like, if you watch Raw week to week, and I can't say that I catch it every week, but I make sure that I catch recaps and I stay up on winning, who wins, and the matches that go down every week. But if you watch it week to week, it's the same show.
Right.
Literally every single week. Storylines don't progress, or they'll introduce a concept and then there'll never be a payoff for that concept. And we're going to get into that a little later, I think, when we talk about some things, like some specific things, and especially when you look at who gets released and how many storylines that just abruptly ended.
Right.
That's a problem, because you're treating your audience like they're stupid. Like they're not actually watching you week to week and not paying attention to what you're doing. It'd be so weird if we were watching a regular TV show, like whatever, Game of Thrones comes to mind, because it was the most recent, hottest TV show. Could you imagine if you watched, on a Sunday night, watched episode 5 of Game of Thrones, and all of these plot points played out, and then you tune back in the following week, and they showed you the exact same plot points.
Right.
Like the whole episode of episode 6 is a recap of episode 5. Like, you would hate it. You would stop watching.
Yeah.
And that's what WWE does all month. They'll do it all month until they give you the pay-per-view. And then you go to the pay-per-view and you're like, why do I care about Finn Balor versus Seth Rollins when I've already seen it 4 times this month?
Right. And I actually would like to harken back to what Anthony said when we did the Full Gear recap just recently, because I thought he made a statement that has stuck with me and really I identified with, when he said that he almost prefers the climb, you know, over when somebody actually wins a match or wins a title. And of course we were talking about Hangman Page and that whole build. And I mean, it's so true. Like, that hit the nail on the head. You know, go through any of the greatest storylines in WWE's history, like those Stone Cold runs where he would take the title back from Michaels or Rock or whatever. You know, all of that. It was all about the build, really. Yeah. And WWE used to be really, really good at that and giving you these huge payoff moments. And then they have really struggled to do that in not just the last couple of months, but really the last couple of years, with the exception of just a few moments here and there, like Daniel Bryan at Mania 30 or Becky Lynch just a few years ago. Like, occasionally they've caught it, but not consistently.
No, and even those moments, it seems to be in spite of what WWE has done.
That's fair.
It's like an organic
because the
thing.
fans want it.
Yeah, the fans make this organic thing happen that isn't being given to them in the storyline. It's a real shame because it seems like McMahon and co can't get out of their own way.
Right.
And you hear the stories about how the writers will spend all day working on a script, and then at 4:00, Vince shows up at the stadium or the arena and completely tears it up. And everybody has to start over for an 8:00 broadcast. Like, that's insanity. Who could possibly work in that type of environment and produce something quality? It would be a struggle. It also deflates your writers. Like, why would they invest in what they're doing?
Right, and I think the difference in what you see in the modern product per backstage talks, like interviews and things like that, versus what we saw back in the day, because the idea of them changing creative and some of that and Vince doing some of these things, that's not really new.
No.
That's not like just something he's done in his old age. You know, that runs deep history of him having that approach to the business. But I think one thing, at least, that kind of affects what ends up coming out on TV is the way they handle the wrestlers.
Yeah.
Because if you think back on the Attitude Era, Stone Cold and The Rock and like, they all talk about how Vince trusted them enough to cut their own promos and kind of like, okay, hey, you know, we're going in this direction, but you all figure out what you're going to say. And it was more natural. They had more creative.
Yeah.
And, you know, we know that in 99% of the cases with WWE in the last, 10 years, these guys are getting handed scripts.
Yep.
They're reading maybe 2 or 3 versions that's getting post-production. They are not as free to do those things and inject it with their side of the creative process. And so I think that that's also why we end up seeing like interview segments that just don't come off, they don't work, or matches because they've just like up and changed them right off the bat, end up being a little flat.
Yeah.
Versus in the back in the day where those guys would just be like, oh yeah, whatever. Well, I got this. You know, Rock would just take it and turn it into gold.
Yeah.
I think it's just a different way they approach it, and it impacts when you try to go back and do some of these things you used to do in the past.
Right. And you think nobody knows the character better than the person playing the character.
Right.
And it's interesting because there have been these moments over the past 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, where like the WWE roster does get to do their own promo. Like, and there's a handful of them that get free reign to say whatever they want. And then there's others that get totally scripted. But what's interesting is you can tell there are moments where a wrestler gets to say what they want to say. And I'm thinking WrestleMania during the rain delay, and they had to fill time.
Yeah.
Drew McIntyre delivered one of the most inspired promos I've ever seen out of him. And I think it's because for the first time in probably a year at that point, he didn't have to say what Vince McMahon wrote for him.
Yeah.
Like, he can just speak from the heart, and it came across as authentic and much better than anything else that he had said up until that point.
Yeah, I think we actually called out something to that effect in our recap of that Mania because it was so obvious and like noteworthy that there was a difference in what was going on here.
The energy was there, like
Right,
the hype was
yeah.
there, like it was like lightning in a bottle. Like, whoa, what's going on? Yeah, it stinks that there's this rain delay, but man, that was a fiery promo and kind of got me back up in my seat, being like, all right, like I'm ready to sit down and watch a 9-hour pay-per-view. And I'd love to see more of that come back. And I just think Vince needs to get out of his own way.
Trust other people.
Trust other people. It's one of those things where, like, you think back of CM Punk years and years ago. He's a millionaire that could be a billionaire if he would just get out of his own way. And he just doesn't seem top to bottom, whether it's a script, the wrestlers, or seeing NXT blossom. That was not his brainchild, therefore it cannot blossom.
Yeah.
At least that's how it seems.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it just begs a lot of questions. You know, I know that there's a lot of wrestling fans everywhere that are just scratching their heads about a lot of what's going on because it's not a talent thing. They have plenty of top tier talent to do whatever they want. I think it's more of that motivation. So,
Yeah.
you know, they're still the king. I don't think anybody's ready just yet to take them off of that pedestal. But I will say that their kingdom is shaking.
Yeah.
And, the foundation is not as sturdy as it had been in the last, 20 years for the most part. And we'll come back to some of that here as we move through the other companies and then ultimately kind of look at a couple of the questions for the future that we have. Moving over here to a smaller promotion, but something that's also been around for, the better part of 20 years, Ring of Honor, which is a company that was founded in Baltimore, Maryland by a guy named Rob Feinstein, really after ECW had closed its doors. His motivation, from what I understand, really was to try and fill a void there, either with that style of wrestling or maybe just a different product from what was left, with WWE after WCW also closed. And it was kind of an interesting situation because it was started by this guy Feinstein early on. He then got caught in some very interesting legal trouble that I won't go into, but just reading about some of that was, it was a little seedy, but
Yeah.
He had to pass it over to a guy named Kerry Silken in 2004. And then ultimately the promotion got bought out by a larger broadcasting company known as Sinclair Broadcasting in 2011. So it was a company that got started. It's managed to kind of weather some of these storms, but it had a number of kind of ownership changes and a little bit of its own turmoil early on. Ultimately, some of that probably added up to them being a company that never quite made it, fully into the mainstream. If you're a wrestling fan, you're familiar with Ring of Honor.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the talent that's been in and out of there, but it never quite got that mainstream, WWE type success. But they did use their indie styling and a lot of the talent sharing partnerships they had with companies like TNA at the time and, a lot of the international promotions to keep that relevance and, develop a little bit of a niche following in some of the more diehard fans, I would say. Even to the point that, from what I read, even just a few years back, Ring of Honor was starting to be believed as having eclipsed Impact from the television programming ratings and their ticket sales, things like that. But ultimately, and as we'll get into more recently, they've kind of fallen back into turmoil and taken a step back.
Yeah. It was interesting to read the history of Ring of Honor because it's always been one of those promotions that you know about. I mean, I live in Maryland, so familiar with it because it is a Maryland-based product. But seeing that, like, they started to grow, they get bought out by the Sinclair group, and then they just kind of plateaued and didn't push to keep growing. I thought that was always really interesting, and I didn't know if it was because the interest wasn't there or if it was by design. And the more I read, it almost seemed like it was by design. Like, they sought out television contracts, but didn't seek out television contracts to the level of like the USA Network or when TNA was back on Spike, things like that. They kept themselves to being like low-key syndicated type stuff. And that was really bizarre to me. It's like, what a weird business model. Maybe they were afraid of WWE. I don't know.
Well, I almost wonder, though, if that is where Sinclair Broadcasting came in, because I imagine Sinclair is a decent sized company, that probably has some channels, but maybe they're not a Viacom or, Paramount or whatever these, huge companies are with all the major channels. Because I think I saw that, Ring of Honor's been on like Access Television and, or Axios, like some of those really kind of obscure channels.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder maybe if that was part of it, was like Sinclair was like, we own this, we're going to put it on one of our channels, but they don't have the USAs, the TNTs, the ESPNs of the world.
Right. And I guess it absolutely could be, but it was just really strange because they clearly had the talent.
Right.
Coming through their roster. You look at all the people that are either current WWE rosters, former WWE rosters, champions, etc. The Bryan Danielsons of the world, CM Punk obviously had a long history with Ring of Honor. Tyler Black, Kevin Steen, which is Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, all those guys.
AJ Styles,
Samoa Joe.
Yeah, they were doing talent shares with TNA, and like a lot of the top guys from there that have become top guys still, in the current age,
Yeah.
had stints at Ring of Honor.
And maybe that's where they developed their craft and then went on to perfect it somewhere else. But you got to think like, wow, looking at who's come through here, how did this not completely take off unless it has an indie vibe? They wanted the indie vibe. They kept it. And unfortunately, with COVID and everything, that's maybe shot them in the foot.
Well, maybe they were a little too clean because I know early on they had that code of conduct, like
Yeah.
the honor code or whatever they called it. And I think they've had a few different iterations, but it was like everybody had to be gentlemen. They had to be sportsmen. They had to shake hands and treat the refs right. Like there were these frameworks that they had put in to kind of make it more of a, I don't even know, legitimate or gentleman's sport. I don't even know how to say it right. But like that was one of their sticks. And that could have been another reason. Like it wasn't as edgy or entertaining, to some extent. So it's hard to say there.
Maybe, but I also think that if you're developing strong heel face characters, that your heels can break those rules. Like
you would hope, yeah.
Yeah, like it's not like a real rule. It's a worked rule.
Right.
So I don't know.
It's a rule for the faces, but not the heels.
Yeah, it's kayfabe. It's a kayfabe rule. It's not like a legitimate thing. So you'd find a way to bring that into your storylines.
Yeah. So ultimately, though, they've kind of been up, they've kind of been down. But really, the big part of this story for Ring of Honor, as far as current news goes, is that in late October of this year, ROH did announce that the company would be taking a hiatus through at least the first quarter of next year. And they actually went so far as to confirm that their entire roster is going to be released after the final Battle pay-per-view event that is scheduled for December 11th, 2021. That was kind of a big shock that went through the wrestling world. And what I thought was interesting as I was looking this up, kind of just take it one step deeper, especially since we've mentioned Sinclair Broadcasting, the parent company, is that it was just a week or two after the Ring of Honor release announcement that Sinclair Broadcasting on one of their investor calls made it known that they are more than $12 billion in debt.
Oh, snap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. You hear about companies in like the millions, hundreds of $12 billion in debt. And I did look into that a little bit and saw that apparently they've put a lot of money, like billions of dollars, into launching this streaming service and, some other things. So I think they're trying to catch up to the times and maybe they don't quite have it all together there. But, you see that, and I would imagine that Ring of Honor with talent like they have and just the production company, it's wrestling's an expensive business to put on. It's an expensive show to put on.
Yeah.
So it was probably one of the easiest places to say, you know what, let's get the balance sheet back in order. We're going to cut these guys out. And it's really unfortunate, but when I saw that, I thought it kind of helped put things a little bit more in perspective from a business standpoint.
Yeah, and perfect way to put that from a business standpoint, because that is the balance that all of these companies are constantly trying to strike. They are a creative front, but a business back, and you have to marry the two in the middle. I thought it was interesting that Ring of Honor did kind of put out a tweet. They did put out information that they anticipated returning to live events in April.
Yeah.
They had the Super Card of Honor, which was supposed to come back in April, but now that's even up in the air. They don't know who they're going to be able to re-sign and bring back. And you can't exactly ask your roster to sit around and wait for 4 months on the idea that they might get a contract, when there's other things happening in the wrestling landscape.
Yeah, from everything that I was reading, I think that the company's future and whether they will actually come back next year are very much in question. I saw nothing that was like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. Couple that with the business side of things. I mean, you get $12 billion in debt. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of months we hear like Warner Brothers is buying Sinclair Broadcasting or something. You know what I mean? And they just sell it all to some other company to kind of resolve that. But, we'll have to see. I thought the positive, though, is that Dave Meltzer did report right around when the release happened that Ring of Honor was being pretty cool about what they were doing.
Yeah.
You know, they essentially said that all of their talent would immediately be allowed to go find jobs elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that with Jay Lethal showing up on All Elite Wrestling just recently. We also have already seen probably the most notable of all their roster, the Briscoe brothers, who had been like diehard only Ring of Honor guys, the tag team.
Yeah.
They have already shown up at GCW. They're the current GCW tag team champions. And so while that doesn't help every single person out there on the roster, I did think that that was a nice move of like, we're not going to hold you to non-competes or anything that might be in those contracts. You know, hey, go take your career elsewhere if you're able to.
Yeah. Well, all these wrestlers make a living on the indie circuit. Like, it's this underground. When you're not looking at WWE, there are still local promotions. I'm thinking your MCWs, which is Maryland Championship Wrestling, your Glamour, WrestleFest, you know, all like Icons, all of these other promotions that are out there that most people aren't seeing day to day, that those non-competes still impact those contracts. Like wrestler that Bray Wyatt can't just go show up, you know, an Evolve show or something like that,
Right,
because of his contract, his non-compete. So it is nice to say, hey, you may not go sign with AEW, but you can still go work. You can still make a living as a wrestler and not have to, you know, go scrounge a job at the grocery store or something like that, or wherever these folks end up landing. So yeah, that is a kind of a solid move by them.
Yeah.
Saying that they were really open about the release, why it was happening, but didn't restrict anybody. You know, thank them for their time. It's a stand-up thing, which is not something you always see in this business.
Yeah, it can definitely be a little cutthroat, you know, especially over the years.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, honestly, Ring of Honor is probably the promotion I watch the least out of the major promotions in America. You know, I'd catch a event or like a match really is what I'm looking for, you know, on YouTube here and there.
Yeah.
But I was really bummed to see this, you know, as a wrestling fan, as somebody that really does want more competition in this industry, you know, seeing one of these, you know, quote unquote big four pretty much just falling apart was the opposite direction that I wanted to see happen in the industry. But I think that there could be a silver lining in the fact that Ring of Honor did have some good talent. We'll probably talk about some of it a little bit later in one of our questions, but the thing I did want to call out was, from what I was reading, they apparently do have like 5, 6, 7 pretty strong women wrestlers.
Yeah.
And now that they are out on the open market, if you will, the free agency market, I actually was thinking that could end up being the best aspect of all of this. Is I still think that AEW needs some work still in their women's division. And it's not just about more people. Like, I think they just need more quality. And even WWE, recent cuts, like there's like 6 women wrestlers, it seems, left, you know, like,
yeah.
So these other groups, Impact, I think hopefully could really up their women's division, maybe with some of the talent here from Ring of Honor.
Oh, absolutely. Because it not only benefits the on-TV product in better matches, but it gives the younger wrestlers who are still developing their skills more training time with somebody that is a proven veteran.
Yep.
Like, you know, you think of Serena Deep, like she came into AEW and I think she's also working in NWA a little bit, but her value on screen is there. But I think her bigger value is actually probably off screen, given her history as a trainer.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely fair. And that's definitely part of it. You know, you got to have that mix to help bring that talent even further up.
Yeah, just developing the off-screen stuff. Like that is developmental wrestling. It's not all shows and Saturday nights. A lot of it is Tuesday afternoons in the gym and getting ring time. And there's a difference between getting ring time with somebody that is also a noob versus getting ring time with somebody that knows what they're doing and can help you along.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to keep this moving, and next up, we're going to take a look at All Elite Wrestling, which, of course, is the brainchild of Tony Khan, a lifelong wrestling fan and son of Jacksonville Jaguars owner Shad Khan. Alongside of him, he actually formed this company with some of the world's greatest wrestlers, talking Cody Rhodes, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks. You know, there was a really decent group of wrestling who's here that came together to form this company. And I mean, it paid off. They burst onto the wrestling scene in 2019 as a direct competitor to the WWE, bringing back what most people would consider a little bit edgier product that emphasizes in-ring wrestling and honestly rejuvenates a lot of the best parts of wrestling history. You know, whether it's match types or the styling, you know, they've kind of got this like greatest hits almost of like the best aspects of wrestling in their product. And additionally, they have really been changing the industry landscape by kicking open what we would all call the forbidden door and acknowledging other promotions on the mainstream stage. So we talked about it a little bit with WWE. They like to act like they are a bubble, that no other shows exist other than Raw and SmackDown, even their own other brands. And some of the smaller companies like Ring of Honor and stuff have done more of this, where they've been able to work with other companies, kind of have what I call home and away matches with their talent, where people are on both shows. And Tony Khan and AEW were all in on that. You know, they have allowed those partnerships, and it's really, I think, elevated the product. It's showcased talent. The fans are super excited. So, you know, All Elite has come on and really, really changed everything.
It's like brought back the territory wars without having like true territories. Like that's my takeaway from the Forbidden Door with AEW is that, yeah, you're right. For so long, WWE only worked within the WWE universe. Yeah, maybe every now and then they did like a special spotlight with Evolve. I know they had a whole contract with Evolve and a few other little promotions, but they wouldn't acknowledge anyone else. AEW, by opening this Forbidden Door, has totally brought back that territory where my champion can show up in your territory and challenge your champion, and then you really get this like big fight feel because you don't know who's going to come out on top. You don't know who's going to show up where. You don't know what sort of ambushes. It blurs the line between real and not real. And it's just been really phenomenal to watch. Like an exposure to all of the other brands that you're not totally familiar with.
Yeah.
And it gives you a reason to go watch Impact because you don't know who's going to show up on Impact. It gives you a reason to pay attention to the New Japan roster because you don't know who's going to pop up on AEW and you want to be familiar with that New Japan roster.
Yeah, perfect example. I was not very familiar with GCW until I started seeing some of these crossovers with Moxley and whatnot that they've done. And so now there's this whole new promotion that's on my radar, and I'm watching YouTube videos and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, that helps GCW elevate. In contrasting it with, you know, the fact that Vince, even if he brings in the hottest talent in the world, you know, there's only a handful like an AJ Styles that have been allowed to come in and maintain their existing persona.
Yeah.
You know, everybody else, even if they came from NXT to Raw, it was like, we have no idea who this man is. And the wrestling fans know that is ridiculous in 2021. And so what I think that is really interesting is that I think that Tony kind of tapped into the reality era of wrestling, the internet age of wrestling. You know, everybody's got a cell phone, so no matter if my top guy is on my TV show or somebody else's TV show, that video is going to hit the internet and get me views.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a little bit more of a respect thing, honestly. I think it respects the fans' intelligence a little bit better, you know, because we have evolved as fans. The industry has evolved, and all of those factors combined, like, you know, when Bryan Danielson shows up in AEW, everybody's aware that he was Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like you're trying, like, Vince still thinks he's trying to, like, pull something over on it. I don't even know why he tries.
Yeah.
And Tony's like, you know what, man? These guys can make their name, and we're going to promote them here. We're going to promote them there. Everybody's going to win.
Yeah, the industry as a whole is going to be better for it. And it sounds cliche, but he's definitely got his finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Way more than WWE. Like I don't want to say it's age, but I think it's just paying attention and really seeing what the wrestling fan wants and then delivering on that. And also knowing who your wrestling fans are. Like, they talk about it all the time, the demo god of Chris Jericho. Like, they're targeting that 18 to 43, 18 to 45, and not trying to go broad, and understanding that they're not stupid.
Right.
They pay attention. They read things online. They pay attention to social media.
Well, I think it's naturally easy for Tony to be tapped in or have his finger on the pulse because really the demographic is himself.
Yeah.
And not like him personally, but he's right around our age. If you look at his backstory, he pretty much has the exact same thing. Started watching right before the Attitude Era, got sucked in, lifelong fan.
Yeah.
The only difference really is he's got billions of dollars to play with versus we're, average everyday people.
Right. Yeah.
But the point is that I think that, he's a guy that's seen the best and the worst and everything in between as a lifelong fan. And so he knows what is good, what works, what doesn't. And he just, is locked in. So, it's not really a surprise that it's working for the key demographic of people like us, that are right in that, 18 to 45 bubble.
For sure. Yeah.
And honestly, they've done nothing so far but gain momentum. And they're definitely grabbing market share. They've got really what I would consider an increasingly exciting product. So far, they've had really strong creative decisions with just a few things here and there that haven't been as good as their top storylines and the things they're putting out. One of their most interesting aspects, though, is that they've already established themselves in just, 2 to 3 short years as the destination for the world's greatest wrestlers to show up. And they've already signed huge names like Sting and CM Punk as a little bit of older names to guys like Miro, Bryan Danielson, as I mentioned, Andrade, Ruby Soho in the women's division, Malachi Black, Adam Cole. I mean, you go down the list, and I mean, anybody that is out there that has a name or is a superstar, like the initial assumption right now is they're going to be all elite.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you hear of a wrestler's wrestler, their destination is AEW, not anywhere else, because that is the biggest platform for pro wrestlers. And we start to, I say this all the time when I'm especially comparing AEW to WWE. There's a difference between professional wrestling and sports entertainment. Room for all, I like both. But AEW is definitely a show that I watch for high quality professional wrestling.
Yep.
With, the storylines are mixed in and they're usually pretty good. While if you're watching the alternative, it does seem to be more entertainment, variety show-ish.
Right, yeah.
And not necessarily a wrestling show.
I honestly have been definitely still riding the wave of hype and everything since they launched. I've been to 2 of the live events. Those crowds were awesome. And pretty much every WWE live event I've been to, those crowds were great too. But there does seem to be a little bit of a different air. When I went to the first Dynamite and it's like 2 hours before the show and there's already 500 people wrapped around.
Yeah.
That's something I never saw at any of the WWE events. Like, it just seems to be a little bit of a different level of excitement. I honestly think the only question right now for them really revolves around, can they continue the meteoric rise that they've already had? And how will they avoid, the same pitfalls that WWE came into when their roster really started to bloat and the fans were constantly in conflict about who should be showcased or what should be done with guys, who should be on top of the women's division. Those same issues that come up with wrestling fans and all the opinions.
Yeah.
Seeing AEW go from like an indie company 3 years ago to now essentially damn near the big dog on the block, I think that's really where we're going to have to watch and see how is that managed.
Yeah, because you can't just say, give an extra hour of TV here or there. Like, you have to be delicate about it because there's already so much wrestling to watch. It will be interesting. I'm actually really nervous about their move to TBS.
Okay.
I don't know how that's going to shake up, and I think you could look at it a few different ways. I actually see it as a negative.
Okay, interesting.
TBS has TNT has always been the bigger of the two networks.
True.
In comparison,
a little bit edgier and everything.
A little edgier.
Yeah.
TNT knows drama. TBS is the place that you go to watch Seinfeld
Yeah, it's the
replays.
family-friendly channel.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but that's just the vibe that it's always given me. And I see them being moved to TBS in January as a downgrade.
Possibly, or maybe they're using AEW to elevate TBS. So I guess that would kind of still be in the same ballpark of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I always thought it was just about all the sports contracts that TNT has because they keep having to shift like when Dynamite's going to happen and things, and it's because TNT now has these deals on the basketball and and some of the other stuff. And so I kind of looked at it like that, but I think you make an interesting point there that I hadn't considered.
It's just, I don't know. We'll see. It could end up being nothing. Maybe they're going to look at it and they're going to say wrestling fans are wrestling fans. They're going to watch no matter what network it's on.
Right.
And they may have test run that with, I have some ratings here, but I don't have the exact ratings of like, okay, when there's a basketball game and Dynamite needs to be moved to a Saturday night instead of a Wednesday night, how does that fare? Maybe they saw some numbers and they said it's not a big deal. So if we were to shift it to TBS, like those people are going to follow the product. And they're no longer trying to catch the average viewer. They've realized who their market is. They're going to start playing to that. That all of that would make sense to me as a TV executive. If you told me that's why this is happening, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But as that casual fan and looking at the two networks, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't seem like a strong move.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to see there. I think, isn't Rampage staying on TNT? Like, I don't think both are going to TBS.
Just Dynamite, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of comes into play. Of course, you got the new TBS Championship. You got the TNT Championship still out there. So, yeah, we'll have to see exactly how all that works out. And that's something that WWE has navigated at times to different levels of success as well, with moves to Fox and then back to USA. I think maybe they had a show on Spike TV or something at one point as well. Like, they've been a little all over the place at times. Raw was always on USA, but they've been a little bit more flexible with SmackDown and some of the other sub shows that they've had over the years. So
yeah, like Main Event was on Hulu, and then it was on Facebook, and Sunday Night Heat back in the day was somewhere.
Right, exactly. I think they had Sunday Night Heat on MTV at one point. So
yeah,
and they all bring different groups of fans. Because your hardcore fans are going to follow you anywhere. But I do think that still, even to today, there is a subset of people that are captured because they are on certain networks, and those people may always have that channel on or whatever it may be. So different packages of cable and streaming. So
yeah,
we'll definitely have to see. I mean, really, that the last thing kind of to say on AEW right now is that they haven't been 100% perfect, but they sure as hell have been better and more consistent week in, week out than WWE over the last 2 to 3 years.
Oh, yeah. And I'll go back to exactly what I said about WWE not rewarding you for watching the product. That is the exact opposite of AEW. AEW very much rewards you for sticking with them week to week. They give you the long-term payoffs. They give you the subtleties that you can pay attention to. They give it to you, and they give you a reason to keep coming back. And I think as long as they keep doing that, they will continue to grow and siphon off some of the main WWE faithfuls.
For sure. Well, then the last one of the big four that we're highlighting here that we have is Impact Wrestling, which has been hanging around in one form or another since it was founded in 2002 by Jeff and Jerry Jarrett, arguably more widely known as Total Nonstop Action, or TNA. This promotion maintained a close partnership with the historic NWA that really helped them get going, has helped them keep relevance over the years, all that history that comes with the NWA. But honestly, one of the best things that they ever did since the time that they were created was that they always built this roster with a really strong mix of kind of top stars from the past with new young talent. And if you look back at TNA, in the early years, you had Sting still pretty much in his prime. You had the Dudley Boys, you had these big names. The Hardys went through there. I mean, go down the line. Kurt Angle, there are a lot of people that still relatively in their prime, really able to go and be a top guy performing there at the same time that they're bringing up Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles and Jay Lethal and like a lot of these younger guys that were really impressive at the time. So it really helped them become, maybe the most successful secondary company post WCW in the wrestling business for the last 20 years from that standpoint.
Oh yeah, they've kept themselves afloat for a really long time with that strategy of having unique matches and a unique ring and a talented roster. And sometimes they're going to lose that talent to other places, and sometimes it's going to feel like they're signing old WWE guys, but they found a way to survive, and you have to give them credit for that. Like, threw in the Dixie Carter era, the Jeff Jarrett era, like all of it. They have found a way to stick around, to get television contracts, and to always kind of just be there,
right?
And it doesn't matter how you look at it. You could say they were never a real threat to WWE. No, they probably weren't. But the fact is, they were still broadcasting on a weekly basis, and they were still paying wrestlers.
Yeah. And I mean, and you look back and watch some of those old shows, they were selling a lot of tickets too.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100,000 people WrestleManias, but your typical basketball stadiums and stuff. I mean, there were plenty of events where there were 10, 15, 20,000 people in those seats. And really, until AEW has come around, that was something that really hadn't happened very much. I mean, I think back just recently, there was a show, I think the first time that AEW went to New York City. And then they said it was literally like the first time since WCW was around that anybody other than WWE had sold out, like 10,000 or more tickets. It was something like along those lines.
Yeah,
the exact numbers are escaping me, but it was like a historic moment simply because somebody else came in and did a show that had success in New York City. But, you brought up Dixie Carter and some of them. I think that on the flip side, like it is kind of amazing that they've managed to stay relevant or hang around through all that. But on the flip side, I think that some of that business side, issues and everything that they went through, that turmoil of getting passed around, you went from the Jarretts to Dixie Carter to ultimately, there was a point where Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan is running the company.
Yeah.
And I do think that probably impacted, the product, the consistency, kind of hurt fans as far as like, what do we expect show to show? So I think a lot of that probably also kept them a little bit down as far as their success.
Yeah, it just made them seem hokey.
Right.
And and for all the reasons that someone may really love Impact or TNA, it could also be seen as why someone else would be like, yeah, that is a joke.
Sure.
It's why I don't watch it. Like the Octagon ring or like the X Division Championship and the X ring, all those things that they've done, you're like, okay, that's kind of interesting. But then it's also one of those things that if you're a casual and you're flipping through channels and you come across this bizarre ring, you're like, is this what professional wrestling is? So it has a weird stigma, but I still think they have hung on. They've produced quality people. Like EC3 had good runs there. Christian had a good run there. Like they've just stayed the course, and
right.
Good for them.
Yeah, I definitely, looking back, I remember when TNA was live and kind of the early years of Impact, I remember looking back with a little bit of that, like, snooty, I'm a WWE guy, kind of thing, and not liking the hexagon ring or whatever it may be. But more recently, I've been watching a ton of TNA and Impact, both old and new, on Pluto, and I have a whole new appreciation for all of it.
Yeah.
And I now actually have like a regret that I didn't give it more time and attention at the time, because there are a lot of great matches, a lot of great moments, some good creativity, and not everything worked, not everything was fantastic, but really looking at their like greatest hits reel, it's a lot to like there, and there's a lot to be impressed by. But ultimately, in 2017, after all this turmoil, after all these changes, the company did rebrand as Impact Wrestling, and they've continued to produce television and live events, but with a little bit of a smaller roster. They never were quite able to reach those heights of their previous success, I would say, but they have maintained relevance in what I would say is really their in-ring talent, because a lot of what they do recently is got a lot of good in-ring talent. The matches are always pretty solid. You've got Moose, Sami Callihan, Jason Alexander, Deonna Purrazzo, Jordan Grace. You've got some really good talent there that has helped keep them. And then ultimately, they also got this relevancy boost recently with AEW and these crossovers that they've been doing, so much to the point that we've even seen megastars from AEW and Kenny Omega and Christian Cage hold and compete for the Impact World title.
Yeah, that has been maybe the best part of that whole Forbidden Door stuff. Once again, you don't know who's going to show up where. Like the Good Brothers have gone back and forth. Don Callis has been all over the place, and it just makes for that exciting TV. Like, and whether it's scripted or not, it does. It brings you back to like, ooh, Lex Luger showing up on WCW and stuff.
Right?
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great, and even most recently, they've even signed a few decent names. They had W. Morrissey come in, who was formerly Big Cass from the WWE. Mercedes Martinez recently signed. And then just recently, in the last week or two, Jonah, who was formerly Bronson Reed in NXT, has shown up and signed with them. So they are still adding to that roster. I think personally, the challenge and what I see in their recent stuff is that they have a creative issue. I think that, it's a lot of just kind of like go and have this match. They're lacking in some of the storyline development, which doesn't have to be insanely strong. I think AEW kind of proves that in a way, but at the same time, you do need some of it. It's part of the wrestling formula.
Yeah, like you have to give them a reason to fight.
Right.
Like there's always got to be some sort of narrative, and you're right. AEW has proven it can be light. It can be just surface level stuff. It doesn't have to be this deep seated generational wrestler versus generational wrestler type deal. But they're just on the mindset that if they can put on a quality in-ring product, it'll keep them afloat. And granted, it has for 20 plus years, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think if they want to take that next step and really get into the conversation, they probably do need a little more development on storylines, just kind of like fine tune the various pieces of their product.
Right. Yep.
With like longer character development, announcing development. Their production can be a little sloppy at times. Really fine tune those in, and I see no reason why a big contract isn't in their future.
Yeah, I do think they also have a little bit of an issue with their talent being really good in ring, but not so good on the mic. And that also feeds into storyline development and that aspect of wrestling. So that's probably part of the puzzle. It might also be why some of these people aren't on a WWE screen or whatever. You do really need to have both sides of that coin, or you need to be exceptional at one or the other, to kind of make up for it. So I kind of look at it and see those types of things where I would hope that they would get better at. But I've got this whole new respect and love for TNA and Impact, and admittedly, I'm behind the 8 ball on that. I know people that have told me for a long time I should have been watching TNA back in the day, and I'm here to say you were right. I think I would agree.
Yeah.
if I had the time, I guess I could probably make some excuses, but either way,
Yeah,
I'm getting there now.
It was a little different. It was a little different. Like as I get older, my appreciation for the in-ring stuff is there. Like maybe a little more than when I was younger, and yeah, I was following it for the soap opera, and a lot of times I still do. But and that kind of seemed to be, well, now AEW is the wrestlers wrestling company. TNA used to be that. So if my appreciation for the in-ring product, if my intelligence watching the product and really seeing the athleticism behind it was maybe a little stronger at a younger age, I would have watched it.
It's all about perspective and all of that, right? And we always evolve as we go on. So
yeah,
I think it kind of fits into that.
Luckily, there's a massive library on YouTube that I can go watch. That opens that door for me.
That's true. But how many times, though, recently over the last 6 months, 12 months, have you and I been talking? And I'm like, dude, I saw this on Impact on Pluto or TNA from 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That was never something that was in my repertoire. And now I feel like I'm regularly bringing up when Sting fought AJ Styles in 2012.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, absolutely. Like, Instagram highlights are amazing for that for me.
Yeah.
Like, that's 100% how I consume some of that old stuff. Is like, before I would have kept on scrolling, and now I'm like, oh, well, let's sit here for 5 minutes and see what happens.
Well, that is the kind of catch up on where we consider, the big four out there right now. And shout out to all the other indie promotions and different companies that are coming and that are out there doing great things. We don't want to completely forget any of them. I know we've kind of touched on a few of them, called them out here, but
there's somebody out there that's like, you didn't bring up NWA. And I'm like,
right. PGW.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. They only have a YouTube channel. It's hard.
But we do want to kind of wrap up here with a couple of questions that we have, taking everything we just talked about and turning our attention to the future and giving some of our thoughts on what we see coming down the line here, including, also some of the outstanding signings that are out there. So we'll start with looking at the big two in WWE and AEW and really who is going to be in control of these companies moving forward, right? So we'll start with WWE. We touched on it. Vince is 70 million years old. He's been around forever. I know he's like HGH to the roof, so he might live forever, but he's old. Like, his time is coming at some point to step away from the business. So, how do you think that impacts Triple H? And I'd even take it one step further, Kyle, and say, do you believe that, Stephanie, Hunter, and Shane take over the company and continue the legacy? Or are the sell rumors true, do you think, and they all walk away?
Well, I've still got my, tinfoil hat theory that Vince McMahon is actually trying to destroy the wrestling industry so that when he leaves us, the wrestling industry no longer exists. So, like, it died when he died. Like, his ego is so big that he can't fathom the idea of the wrestling industry outliving him.
Vince is the alpha and the omega.
Yes, yeah, basically. At the dawn of time, the universe spit out infinity stones in Vince McMahon.
I love it.
and he's the end all be all. But no, more seriously, I don't think it's going to be Shane. I don't see how it's going to be Stephanie. Triple H seems like for a long time, like he was the next one up. But now it's really confusing because you got Nick Khan in the mix in WWE. Like, I don't think it's going to be Bruce Pritchard. I don't think it's going to be John Laurinaitis. So selling looks more and more logical. And it's really bizarre to think about. But, like, it really seems like it's going to be this. They're going to sell to somebody big, and they're just going to be a content company.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that now. If you would have asked me the same question 2 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have given you my canned response of there's no way WWE is owned and operated by anybody other than the McMahon family because of what you saw in Shane and Stephanie's involvement. Stephanie's an executive. Triple H is running creative and seemed to have been striking gold with NXT.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't seem to be so sure, because you have Nick Khan in there now, and it seems like a lot of the announcements that are coming out, whether it's business side or roster releases, like it's not Vince's name we're seeing a lot or Triple H, it's Nick Khan, it's John Laurinaitis, it's some of these kind of behind the scenes people, and usually beforehand it would always be like Vince or whatever, like it always seemed to always stop with the McMahons.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes in the Nick Khan direction because you look at their bottom line, and they made in Q3 of 2021, they made $255.8 million in revenue, despite releasing a ton of people, despite putting on a crap product.
Right.
And so I think they have really done an analysis and realized it doesn't matter what we put on television. We are going to generate money. And so who cares? Who's in control? What stories are being told? Let's just put something out there because we know people will continue to buy our merch and will continue to make money. And I think until that bottom line gets hit, nothing's going to change, and they're going to keep this course of a business first mentality creative is second.
I'm really at a loss. I mean, I was thinking long and hard about this, and just given the current state, like the last 6 months, like I said, my sentiments right now on struggling to bring myself to watch. I mean, I will just put it this way. If Vince were to step down and the announcement is that Triple H and Stephanie own this company and Triple H can do whatever he wants, I am 100% all in to see how that works out.
Oh, yeah.
If they announce that they're selling to NBC or Disney, I'm going to never watch the product again, most likely.
Yeah.
And I just, because I don't see any reason for me to do that. You know, if it's already where it's at now, I don't see anybody outside of that group, you know, really saving it. You know, I don't see some business executive like Nick Khan changing the wrestling product.
Right.
You know, and maybe it's possible. Maybe they would find somebody like a Tony Khan who could come in and all these cons, you know, but
right.
but maybe they could do it, you know, but I would be very skeptical. And so I am a little bit worried right now about, you know, something that I've loved for 25 years kind of maybe crashing and burning and not being part of my life, you know, moving forward. If
look at the downfall of WCW. That's exactly how WCW went down.
Yep.
Like all of a sudden, TV execs and
AOL,
non-wrestling people started to get their fingers into the product, and it all just bottomed out.
Yeah.
And you don't want to see it happen. I'm 100% with you. If they were to announce Triple H is taking over on all creative, or Paul Heyman or someone like that, like a trusted name of the business is going to start leading creative, I'm
Edge.
all in. Edge. Yeah, why not? Like Edge and Randy Orton. Yeah, I would do it. I'd be like, yeah, okay. Like honestly, you could, like, even Seth Rollins to some extent. Like, tell me a wrestler or somebody that has been living and breathing the business is taking over, okay. But if you were to tell me, oh, well, Nick Khan is now head of everything, including creative, I'm like, I'm not sure I can believe in this anymore.
Right. They would have to rebuild all their credibility.
Yeah, they'd have to really, really do something strong to get us all hooked again. Because I think people would just be like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah, because Braun Breaker is not going to be it, you know? As much as I want to support that guy because he's like Rick Steiner's son, I just can't get behind them, you know, making those types of early 90s character type folks, you know, the way they're going with it. So
yeah,
we will see. I think it's an interesting comparison, though, here to the second part of our question, which is AEW, because even though they have been so hot that they have been capturing lightning in a bottle and minting their own money right now with how they approached the launch of their company and their creative, you know, we've recently heard in the last few months that the executive vice presidents, which were, you know, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, like some of those top tier wrestling talents having the seat at the table, they are now giving all the creative control over to Tony Khan. So the question becomes, how do you see that going, and will their success grow or fall as a result of this move?
I think a headline version of that makes me worried. But then when you dive deep into, okay, well, here is kind of why all of these things are happening, you start to feel a little more comfortable. And what I'm saying is like, okay, Matt Jackson has kind of moved into the merchandising area with his wife, and Nick Jackson is kind of moved into their YouTube content, and Kenny Omega is starting to get really hands-on with the AEW video game and stuff like that. So you find out, okay, they're just starting to realize that they all need to spread out and make sure that every single part of this company is firing on all cylinders.
Right. Yep.
And leaving one creative mind to generate the on-screen stories.
Yeah, I do think that makes sense. I mean, their growth as a company and how fast they're jumping into other things like the video games and stuff like that, it demands it.
Yeah.
Right. And some of these guys are older, so I think that also is kind of the other side of it, is that the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Jericho, even Cody have all pretty much had their careers, and so they're older. They're gonna need to start making those moves like Triple H did, where he's mostly business side, wrestles maybe once a year, that kind of stuff. So that all made total sense. I really don't have a real issue with it at the moment. I do expect them to just continue their upward trend. But I will say the one thing that I think just I gotta put out here is that we just spent an hour and a half talking about Full Gear, and we all said, the three of us that were on that it wasn't quite as good as what we'd seen on the last few pay-per-views. And the main thing I kept highlighting was that the finishes and stuff were just a little weird. Some of the matches, like Kingston and CM Punk, were really kind of quickly put together, which we hadn't seen that rush with their previous stuff. And so I just have to beg the question, being that this was kind of the first pay-per-view since we got the announcement that Tony's fully in control, like, was this a result of that? Or was it just a hiccup? Like, it was just coincidence?
Well, I mean, this announcement came in early October.
Right, I'm saying, but then so you had like a month at least before Full Gear.
Yeah, but I'd like to think that while the announcement came in October, these plans, like, things had already started to go in this direction long before that. So while All Out was in September, like, they were already headed down this path.
That's possible.
And,
yeah.
and they already knew. So there is some worry there, I think. And that would be my excuse. All Out was so good that there was no way that Full Gear was ever going to live up to it.
That is true too. Yeah. I mean, we all talked like All Out was like a 5-star pay-per-view across the board, and that is always hard to come back on.
Now, if Revolution comes around in Q1 and that also trends down, then I'll be like, ooh, okay, yikes. Or if, like, ratings start to slip because Kenny Omega is hurt and he's not on the show every week, and, like, I saw that the Young Bucks are also taking a break to recover from some injuries, so if they're not on TV as much and ratings start to slip, like, okay, then maybe start to worry, not hit the panic button, but start to worry.
Yeah.
For now, Tony Khan hasn't had too many missteps so far, so I'm going to trust him for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you too. I just think that in the context of this question, that was like the one kind of contrary point or anything I could kind of look at. I was like, we got this announcement about a change, a little bit of a difference here in the product. Is there a correlation or not? But I'm with you. I'd put it at like 90-10. I feel good versus concerned.
And my belief is that they're the total opposite of WWE. Tony Khan's not coming in on a Wednesday night, ripping up the script and doing whatever he wants. He's holding true to long-term plans.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, moving over here to our next question, it was around the outstanding signings, with all of the releases between WWE, Ring of Honor. There is a large amount of talent that is out there just kind of swimming around in free agency in the world of professional wrestling. We are not going to be able to go through all of these. There's too many of them.
It's like 200 wrestlers.
Yeah, there's like 200 right now. But we did want to touch on some of them. So, of course, you've got some big names out there. Braun Strowman, Keith Lee, John Morrison, Ember Moon, Karrion Kross, Danhausen. There are some decent names out there that are going to be very interesting to see where they're going to go. But in the interest of time, we're going to look at a few others here. So we'll kind of quick shot them here, Kyle. We can't go too much into every one of them, but Bray Wyatt or Wyndham Rotunda, where do you think he's going to end up?
I think he's already signed his deal in Hollywood, and he's going to make movies. I think he's going to step away from wrestling for a little bit.
Really?
And just make movies.
I have not heard that.
Oh, yeah. He was cited at a Warner Brothers studio. And then it got shortly announced that he is in the works to, I don't know what his exact role is going to be, producer, writer, whatever, but he's taken his talents to San Diego or California, and he's going to go make horror movies, I guess. And I think he may step away from wrestling. He may come back. I think in the wrestling sphere, Impact is a good spot for him. I just don't, he's too spooky and supernatural for AEW. But I think he's going to try his hand at Hollywood for a while.
Okay. I hadn't heard that, but I'm really liking that idea. I know Mick, when we talked to Mick Arcade, he had brought up Impact Wrestling, and I thought that was a good take because, I really do want to see Impact get bigger, and I think a name like that would really help them, with some of the issues we were just hashing out. But I'm kind of really digging this idea now that you're telling me that he's going to step away, because I think that the challenge that Bray has is that he's underappreciated by the wrestling industry. I think the fans, for the most part, appreciate him, but Vince didn't know how to use him, and he has the ability to really be kind of a game changer when he's on. And so maybe take that step away. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Like, it might actually just do nothing but help his brand, and then let him come in, even if it is an AEW, when they need a shot of adrenaline in a year or two or something. So I'm kind of digging that.
Yeah, and can you imagine the pop of Wyndham Rotunda returning to wrestling?
Dude, I like that. I'm just gonna go with that. So let's just assume that happens on him, and we'll move on here. So another big one here. Maybe one of the biggest ones that is getting some attention recently is Johnny Gargano. Johnny Wrestling. His contract is up next week from when this podcast is going to come out. And from the rumor mill that was going around this week, WWE threw a quote-unquote strong offer, whatever that means, at him right before Thanksgiving to try and re-sign him.
I do not see him re-signing with WWE. I just don't see how he looks he's in his prime. Like, he's in the prime years of his life. They're in this middle of a shift where they want to go bigger and bolder. I don't see where he fits into that landscape as a wrestler. And the fear of being turned into a manager would keep me from signing, no matter how much money they would put at me. And so I don't necessarily... They're getting a little too big, so I got to be delicate with how many people I throw in this direction. But AEW does seem like a good spot for him to land.
Stylistically, I agree. I think that, him and Adam Cole and Ciampa, all those guys would fit right in at AEW from the way that they handle their wrestling and all that. I don't know if there's a place for him, if I'm being honest. I think what might be best for him is to stay put, because AEW's got a roster issue and he's a smaller guy. They've got the TNT championship, but I don't see Gargano in the title picture, the heavyweight title picture in AEW anytime soon. So he's just going to be this mid-card guy, which they also have a plethora of, and I'd say that Adam Cole fills that spot already. So I don't know. I think what might be best for him would be to stay, and if I were to say what I would want, it would be another one of those, go to Impact and help build that company up into something bigger, because I think Gargano would be... The fans would want him, but I think he would end up actually getting lost in the shuffle at AEW.
Yeah, he'd probably come over as a WWE guy with stink on him, maybe. Even though he was never a WWE guy, he's always been an NXT person. I think if he's going to stay WWE, I want him to team up with Ciampa again, and then go on a DIY tag team run.
Well, tag team, or let them make a faction that dominates the main roster or something like that,
It's tough to say. I think the key to where he signs may also be, what does his wife's contract look like?
Sure.
Where is Candice's contract? Because she's pregnant right now, so she's been off TV for a while. But how many years does she have left in WWE?
Yeah, because you got a lot of couples out there in the wrestling world that seems to be kind of coming into play. Just Britt Baker and Adam Cole for one,
Yeah, Britt Baker, Adam Cole, and another crew here on our list is Johnny Drip Drip and Frankie Monet, Taya Valkyrie. Who knows? They're going to probably try to stay together, but they've been married for a long time. They've probably navigated that in a few different directions.
Yep.
But will they sign together? Will they sign separate? Karrion Kross and Scarlett in the same general vein? Are they going to go in the same place? Are they going to break it up?
Well, and then before we get to maybe one of the other biggest ones coming up here, you've got Nia Jax out there, and one that you were calling out before, which is Tegan Knox. So where do you think those two might end up?
I don't know where Nia Jax is going to go, because she can't go back to WWE, and I'm not sure any of the other places would want to sign her because of her lack of in-ring skill. And just put it out there bluntly, she's not a very good wrestler, in my opinion. I think she's dangerous. I think she's proven that she's dangerous. I think she needs help. But I also think her ego is so big that she won't go back to a developmental type place. So I don't know where she's going to go. I don't know where she's going to land. I don't think the Knockouts division in Impact needs her. And I don't think AEW wants her. So she's got to try her hand at the indie circuit and try to revitalize her career that way.
Yeah, I think the challenge with AEW is that you've got Nyla Rose there, which is almost the same character in a way. You know, just big, powerful, beat your ass woman that can fill that role in the roster.
Yeah.
I think you could make room for one or two more of those types of people because, you know, there's only so many of them in women's wrestling.
Right.
But I do agree with you there. The challenge that I think with Nia Jax is that out of most of the women, you know, even the Ember Moons and some of them, she's got the best resume. Despite her talent, you know, she's got WWE women's title victories. She's got tag team title victories. You know what I mean? So, like, she would be kind of a big get from that standpoint, even if the more diehard fans or those of us that follow things a little bit closer may not feel that way. You know what I mean? I think more to the casual fans or anybody who'd been watching WWE for the last few years or any of the young girls out there that have been watching women's wrestling over the last few, you know what I mean? Like those types of fans.
Yeah.
I think that would be a little bit of a get because she does have that name recognition and, you know, some of that resume there, whereas some of the other female wrestlers don't.
No, and that's fair. I would agree with that because you're right. You know, as a character, it's there for her. I think my dislike for her as a performer is coming through here where I'm like, I'm kind of alright if she just,
you
know, fades into nothing.
Yeah, she's not great on the mic. Like, I mean, there's a lot of criticism that can be thrown at her, and it's not just shade. I mean, it's deserved.
It's right there, and that's why I said I would the indie circuit. Go on the indie circuit and, you know, cut your teeth and earn your stripes.
Right.
Whatever cliche you want me to throw out there, she needs to go and do that bit. Tegan Knox and Ember Moon, I would love to see in AEW. I think Tegan Knox is an incredible wrestler, but that was never really given the time to do anything in WWE.
I'd agree.
Between she competed in the Mae Young Classic and performed well, ended up getting hurt, and that was really unfortunate. Came back to NXT, had some bright spots, showed that she could be a performer, unfortunately got hurt again, and then gets bumped up to the main roster, which is really frustrating how that one shook out.
Yeah. Because
she got paired with Shotzi Blackheart. They earned a title shot, were never given a title shot, and now she got cut. And so I think Tegan Knox is this performer that can go at a high level. I don't know if she's a main eventer. We've never seen it. We've never had her she's never been given the opportunity to be a main eventer. So I would like to see her get in the mix of that AEW women's division and just not, you know, come in low tier and earn your way to the top. And I say that because, you know, I'm just not watching Impact week to week. And I'm watching AEW week to week, and I want to see week to week.
Hey, that's fair, right? That's what it's all about. Yeah, I think that is completely fair. So we'll definitely have to see where they land. I think maybe the last one we'll touch on here in the interest of keeping this moving forward would be a big one that is coming up in January of 2022. You reminded me of this right before we jumped on here, and that is KO, Kevin Owens, one of the biggest stars that WWE has had over the last 5 or so years from NXT into the main roster. So I think that this is I think KO is a bigger situation than Johnny Gargano is by far. And because of the fact that he legitimately could walk into any promotion and be into the main world title picture.
Oh, yeah.
And so where do you think KO is going to roll?
So I said I need to be careful with how many people I throw in this direction. But I also want to put it out there that a lot of these other names that we're either not talking about or the ones that we're kind of breezing over, I would absolutely send to Impact.
Yeah.
I think Ember Moon, Karrion Kross, Johnny Morrison, Keith Lee, all would be amazing in Impact. And the other piece is that the Forbidden Door is wide open. So just because somebody's going to Impact doesn't mean I'm not going to still get to see them on AEW.
That's a great thing to call out. I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that is the important thing here with what we've seen with AEW is that some of these people could go to New Japan, they could go to GCW, they could go anywhere, and we still get to stay up with them as far as, you know, they may come and have feuds on AEW television, etc. So that I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to throw that in here and I had totally forgot about that idea.
Yeah, but with all that said, yeah, I want Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
I want it. You know, I want Kevin Steen, Adam Cole, and the Young Bucks. I want Mount Rushmore. I think the Twitter teases of it all have gotten me too hyped up over it. And I just want to see Kevin Owens be happy because it feels like it's been a long time since he's been happy as a wrestler. On screen, I think it shows, and I don't know if he's just a really good actor or not, but he just doesn't seem to be enjoying himself in WWE right now. And he's so talented. And his shot in the arm when he came up in NXT and powerbombed Sami Zayn into the side apron and then went on to become NXT champion, challenged John Cena for the US belt. Like, all of that was so exciting. Like, the KO hype was so real. And he's been such a solid performer over the past few years. I hate to see him just whittle away, chasing the 24/7 title or being a goober on Raw.
He's been a hard one to watch because, I mean, the first time I saw him in NXT, I immediately was like, that's one of my new guys.
Yeah.
Like, I immediately jumped on the KO train and, seen him at his heights, seen him at his, some peaks and valleys, I guess I'll put it that way, with WWE. And so I think out of the entire list, as much as I like some of these other guys and I think that they could have success, KO is the one that out of all of them I probably care about the most and would actually want to see come into an AEW and be right there in the thick of things. So it is hard because right now everybody's all elite, it's just how it is. It's where they want to go. It's on top. It's hot. It's where the money is, I guess you could say, at the moment. But they will still have to manage that. And as we said earlier, the pitfalls that come with signing everybody. But there are a couple names that you're just like, I want you in the best place in the world, where I'm putting all my time and attention, all my money, get onto this roster.
Exactly. And I think a good example of that is Matt Cardona. He signed with All Elite, and now he's with GCW.
Yep.
And I had no problems with that brief switch because I know I'm still going to get to see him every now and then. I know that he's still making his money. He's still plying his trade in the professional wrestling business. But there are a couple of people that you just absolutely want on that AEW roster week to week. And because you feel like they've proven they can come in, like Adam Cole doesn't have a WWE stink.
No.
And I think if KO came over, he'd shed it instantly.
Yeah.
And he'd be able to fit right in to that roster, to that landscape, and also let the Darby Allins and the Dante Martins and MJFs, the homegrown AEW talents, still shine and work their way up the card, intermixed with these guys that are coming out of WWE.
Well, and KO's the kind of guy that can have great matches with anybody. So, you would imagine that even if he's not fighting for a belt, he's the kind of guy that could really help elevate some of those younger talents and bring them up. So there's a lot of upside there. We could probably just talk about that for a whole chapter here, but
if we just dream matched
if
we just went through and dream matched it, I don't need KO to come over to AEW and fight Bryan Danielson. I've seen that, and I know it's going to be good. I want him to come over, and I want him to fight
Omega or somebody.
Omega or Christian Cage. That's what I want to see. MJF. KO MJF. Imagine that promo back and forth.
That would be wild.
Mwah.
Well, last two questions here. Let's hit them a little bit quick as we wrap up. So, will the success of AEW and the stumbling of WWE, a little bit of blood in the water there, lead to more industry growth?
I don't think that AEW and WWE's rivalry is going to lead to industry growth unless they can find a way to get higher ratings. The industry as a whole, like, and I think when we really started to think about this question, we were talking about, are we going to see new promotions show up and more TV contracts? And I think and the TV contracts aren't going to come for newer companies until Dynamite, Rampage, Raw, SmackDown, and NXT all start doing higher numbers across the board. And it's tough because the real competition there is not the other wrestling promotion. It's the other content on television. It's Monday Night Football.
That's fair.
That's really, it's the NBA games. That's really where their competition is. And until they can start to make a dent in that audience and get back to the 2-3 million viewers a night, because right now they're all, with the exception of SmackDown, they're all sitting around like 800,000, 900,000. They break a million, it gets exciting. But until they can get back in that $2-3 million range or million viewer range, you're not going to see any new promotions pop up.
Yeah.
So like it grow absolutely, but have this like tremendous overhaul where like wrestling takes the spotlight again. Not until the ratings come up a bit, in my opinion.
I actually think that's really fair. As much as I want to say yes, I want more competition. I want more opportunities to go see my favorite wrestlers and the whole 9 yards. I don't think it's realistic right now, and I think you put it perfectly because of that. You know, it comes down to how many people are out there tuning into your channel, hitting your YouTube channel, buying tickets, and I don't see that growing at the moment. You know, looking back at the Attitude Era, one of the phenomenons of that whole situation was that those two companies in WWE and WCW were capturing the attention of non-wrestling fans.
Yeah.
You know, when they were doing things with Mike Tyson, or people thought that the NWO were literally, you know, having street fights out in the middle of the street and calling the cops, you know, they were getting the average non-fan to tune in at times and be interested in all of that. So I think that is a very good point that kind of sums it up. You know, companies are only ever going to get so big without TV. And I don't know if TV contracts are going to get thrown out left and right without. Yeah, like we've got
hard evidence.
100 million new people out there that are watching our product or something like that. So
to prove that wrestling can be marketable to a wider audience, I just think that's what it's going to take.
Well, and it's already so hard. I think kind of the thing that goes with that is the fact that, you know, just with what's on TV today, there's like 10 hours a week of television to keep up with. And the average bear can't do that. Your super fans can. Your average bear can't do it. Even as much as we can't do it. And so starting to stack onto that, you're just not going to get everybody. So I think that's really where it lands for me. Hopefully, but probably not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're both such big fans. We want the industry to grow.
Right.
Like, absolutely.
Well, and then the last one here to wrap up. In 5 years, which company is on top of the American market? So out of the 4 that we talked about, if you had to throw all your money down on one of these companies, who do you think is going to be the, you know, standalone, like true number one in the American pro wrestling industry?
It may not be the product that I'm watching, but it's WWE.
You still think they're going to hold tight?
I think in 5 years, numbers to numbers, they're going to be top dog. Like I said, I don't know if I'll be watching it in 5 years. I don't know if I'll have moved on and just hate the product so much that I'm exclusively watching other promotions. But I think because of kind of how I started this whole conversation by saying like WWE is Kleenex.
So you think just like from the business side of things, right? Like if we were just looking at like valuation or something, you think that will still be WWE?
In 5 years, yes. Yeah, in 5 years. I think, yeah, just total revenue, WWE.
Okay.
Pure wrestling fans, probably AEW.
Okay. I think that would be a safe bet. It's really hard to count out WWE, especially the machine that it is right now. And if it were to get the backing of the mouse or the peacock or something like that, even more than it has, then that could definitely be something that's just, you can't overcome it.
Yeah.
But I think my answer straight up beyond that would be AEW from the wrestling standpoint. And I think that it's because of what you said with finger of the pulse and what the fans want. But honestly, the way I was looking at it, also from kind of a business standpoint, but maybe a little bit different of a business standpoint, is that I think right now that they have a much stronger appeal to the slightly older generation, like the people our age, so we'll call it like 25 to 50, that have disposable income, that have, you know, the ability to go out and buy merchandise, to buy tickets and those kinds of things. And then ultimately the people that will steer their kids more towards AEW now than maybe before, where it was like I had to let my kid watch WWE because there wasn't much else out there, right? Like, you know, I'm thinking about myself in 5 or 10 years. If I'm sitting down with my kid, am I going to have them watching Monday Night Raw or AEW Dynamite? And right now, the answer is probably Dynamite.
Yeah.
So I was kind of looking at it from that angle of, you know, does that kind of shift things a little bit in the fact that some of the folks like you and I, where we're at in life, you know, are shifting away from WWE and to AEW.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and I think maybe my timeline is a little different, that I wouldn't start to see that change for 10 years from today.
Yeah, that would be more generational, especially with the kids aspect for sure.
Yeah, and really kind of like pumping that, and I just think between, like you said, the Peacock money, the McMahon money, the Saudi money, the WWE machine is hard to beat right now.
For at least the next 5 years.
For at least the next 5 years. I mean, hey, if we're 5 years from now and they're equal, I actually consider that a win on the AEW
Huge
side.
win, yeah.
Huge win. And then 10 years from now, AEW is like the clear-cut winner. That would be incredible.
It'd be like one of the
be
biggest
incredible.
upsets in business history, to be honest. You
Yeah.
know?
Right,
There'd be
yeah.
case studies on these two companies, you know, as far as how you could attack a market dominant, you know, entity and then overtake them. Yeah.
For sure. But the world of wrestling has been going through a much-needed shakeup over the past few years, and we are eager to see how it progresses or maybe plateaus. Hit us up on social to let us know if the emergence of AEW has pulled you back into the sports entertainment universe, or if you've been here all along and where you think the industry will go moving forward.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this discussion, go ahead and smash the subscribe button so you never miss a chapter of GeeK KetchUp, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Also, be sure to follow GK on social media. You can find links to all of our accounts on the show notes below and on our website, GeeKKetchUpPodcast.com. There's even links to our merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support the show. But as always, remember to stay saucy, you nerds.